A prejudiced woman meets her biracial granddaughter for the first time, whose innocent love breaks through years of bitterness and regret. Margaret sat in her dimly lit bedroom, the soft hum of the oxygen machine, the only sound accompanying her fading breaths. The once proud matriarch of the Alcott family now lay frail and weak, her once fiery spirit diminished by time and illness. She stared out the window, her thoughts swirling in a mixture of regret and stubborn pride. For years, Margaret had refused to reconcile with her only son, David. She had raised him with unwavering discipline, instilling in him the values and traditions she held dear. But when David announced he was marrying Priya, a woman of Indian descent, Margaret's world had shattered. She had called it betrayal, an affront to their family's legacy, and had severed ties without looking back. Decades passed, and in the quiet moments of her solitude, Margaret often wondered about David. Was he happy? Did he have a family of his own? Her pride had kept her from reaching out, and now, as her health declined, she feared it was too late. One crisp autumn afternoon, the sound of footsteps echoed in the hallway. Margaret turned her head toward the door, her curiosity piqued. Her nurse, a gentle woman named Clara, entered the room, followed by a man Margaret hadn't seen in over 20 years. "David," she whispered, her voice barely audible. David stood in the doorway, his face a mixture of sorrow and hesitation. His once boyish features had matured, his dark hair now streaked with silver. Behind him stood a woman with warm brown eyes, Priya, and beside her, holding her hand, was a little girl no older than 10. "Hello, Mother," David said softly, stepping forward. Margaret's eyes flickered to Priya, then to the child. Her expression hardened, but the effort drained her, and she sank deeper into her pillow. "What are you doing here?" she asked, her tone sharper than she intended. David exchanged a glance with Priya, who nodded encouragingly. He took a deep breath. "I heard about your condition," he said. "I couldn't let things end like this. I wanted you to meet someone." He gently nudged the little girl forward. She clutched a small, colorful bouquet of wildflowers in her tiny hands. Her curly hair framed her face, and her wide, curious eyes studied Margaret with a mixture of awe and caution. "This is Amara," David said, "your granddaughter." Margaret's breath caught. The child was a perfect blend of her parents, with caramel-toned skin, and features that hinted at both her father's lineage and her mother's heritage. Amara took a small step closer, holding out the flowers. "These are for you," she said, her voice soft but steady. Margaret hesitated, her gaze fixed on the girl. Slowly, she reached out a trembling hand and took the bouquet. The flowers were simple, but their vibrant colors seemed to brighten the room. "Thank you," Margaret murmured, her voice cracking. Amara smiled, her dimples deepening. "You're welcome." An awkward silence filled the room. David pulled up a chair and sat beside the bed, Priya standing quietly by his side. "Mother," David began, "I know we've had our differences. I know I hurt you by marrying Priya, but I hope you can see now. We're a family. Amara has heard so much about you. She's been asking to meet you for years." Margaret's gaze shifted from David to Priya. The younger woman's expression was calm, but her eyes held a hint of vulnerability. "I never wanted to hurt you, Mrs. Alcott," Priya said gently. "I only wanted to love your son and build a life with him. I hope you can find it in your heart to forgive us." Margaret's chest tightened. She had spent so long clinging to her anger, her conviction that David had betrayed their family. But now, faced with the tangible proof of the life he had built, a life filled with love and happiness, her resolve began to waver. Amara climbed onto the edge of the bed, her small hand resting on Margaret's frail arm. "Grandma," she said, her eyes earnest, "Daddy says you're really smart and really strong. I think you're pretty too." A laugh bubbled out of Margaret's throat, surprising even herself. It was a sound she hadn't made in years. "Is that so?" she asked, her lips curving into a faint smile. Amara nodded vigorously. "And I made you a card." She pulled a folded piece of paper from her pocket and handed it to Margaret. With trembling hands, Margaret unfolded the card. It was covered in colorful crayon drawings of flowers, hearts, and stick figures. In wobbly letters it read, "I love you, Grandma." Margaret's vision blurred as tears welled in her eyes. She clutched the card to her chest, overwhelmed by a flood of emotions she couldn't put into words. "I'm sorry," she whispered, her voice breaking. "I'm so sorry." David reached for her hand, his touch warm and reassuring. "It's okay, Mother," he said. "We're here now. That's all that matters." Margaret looked at Priya, who offered a small, forgiving smile. "Can you ever forgive me?" Margaret asked, her voice trembling. Priya nodded. "There's nothing to forgive. We're family." Amara nestled closer to Margaret, her small presence a source of unexpected comfort. For the first time in years, her heart felt light. Margaret whispered a silent prayer of gratitude. She had spent so much of her life building walls, but now, in her final days, those walls were crumbling. In their place stood a bridge built on love, forgiveness, and the innocent wisdom of a child. If you found this video interesting, then please consider liking and subscribing. Also, check out other videos on my channel. Remember to stay safe and be forgiving as well as appreciative of your loved ones. Goodbye.